Britain's asylum system has hit a breaking point.
London is dying.
England is in a fast tsunami going nowhere.
The chaos soon erupted into riots, burned streets and sweeping new laws, leaving Britain torn between public pressure and humanitarian responsibility. Britain's decision to house asylum seekers in hotels, meant to relieve pressure on an overstretched system, collided head-on with a country already choking on housing shortages, rising costs and collapsing public services. In towns where locals had waited years for social housing or GP appointments, seeing entire hotels sealed off for migrants felt like a slap in the face. Tensions simmered for months, but they finally boiled over when protests outside asylum hotels turned violent.
Refugees are welcome here! Refugees are welcome here!
Shouting quickly escalated into riots, arson and street battles. Vehicles were torched, shops looted, council buildings wrecked, and entire neighborhoods plunged into chaos. One hotel in Leeds housing migrants collapsed amid the unrest, becoming a symbol of how badly things had spiraled out of control. Communities that had once donated clothes and food to refugees now felt betrayed.
You've only got to look at the state of the country. It's not safe, not only women and girls, for men to walk out on their own at the right time. Us people who are paid in to the system.
Social media amplified fear and misinformation, while anger spread faster than facts. Police forces were overwhelmed, councils scrambled to respond, and the government found itself staring at a crisis it could no longer manage quietly behind closed doors. Britain's asylum debate was no longer about policy or paperwork. It had exploded into a raw, visible fight over space, security, and who the system is really meant to serve. Across multiple cities, protests spiraled into sustained violence. Cars were set ablaze, shop fronts smashed, and public buildings reduced to rubble. Entire neighborhoods were locked down as riot police struggled to regain control. By the time the dust settled, millions of pounds worth of damage had been done, hundreds of residents were injured, and thousands were arrested. Police officers were assaulted, emergency services stretched to the brink, and local councils pushed into crisis mode. For many ordinary people, this was the breaking point, proof that something had gone badly wrong. Areas already under pressure saw crime spike, fueling the belief that asylum policies were directly linked to declining safety. Meanwhile, far-right groups moved quickly to exploit the chaos, organizing protests outside migrant hotels and clashing with counter-demonstrators, pulling even more people into the conflict. Behind the violence was a pressure cooker that had been building for years. Britain's housing system was already on life support, and the asylum surge pushed it to the edge. Social housing hit near full capacity, private rents soared, and councils were forced to book hotels at massive public cost just to keep people off the streets. For locals stuck on waiting lists for years, watching entire buildings handed over overnight felt deeply unfair. That resentment only grew as welfare spending jumped and council budgets were drained by emergency accommodation bills running into hundreds of millions. Public services buckled under the strain. Schools in high-intake areas saw sudden spikes in admission, classrooms overcrowded, and councils scrambling for teachers and funding they didn't have. GP surgeries and hospitals felt it too, with NHS waiting times stretching longer as demand rose faster than capacity. The narrative hardened. The system was failing everyone, but ordinary taxpayers were paying the price.
Markets! That's the issue we have in our country.
Even communities that had once welcomed refugees began to turn inward. Charities reported donor fatigue, volunteers stepping back, and a growing sense of mistrust between neighbors. Councils quietly warned the central government they were close to breaking point, unable to meet legal duties on both residents and asylum seekers. Housing, healthcare, education and welfare were all being stretched beyond design limits, and the cracks were now impossible to ignore. Faced with a system spiraling out of control, Labour responded with the toughest overhaul Britain's asylum framework has seen in decades. The message was clear: the old system was broken and patience had run out. Under the new rules, asylum is no longer a stable pathway to settlement. Status is granted temporarily for just 2.5 years, with reassessment allowed at any point if conditions in a migrant's home country are deemed to have improved. In practice, that means families can be uprooted with little warning, living under constant uncertainty. Permanent settlement, once achievable in 5 years, has been pushed to a staggering 20. For many, that turns asylum into a lifetime of limbo rather than a route to stability. Financial support has also been tightened. Those judged able to work or found to have savings or assets risk losing assistance altogether. This move, critics warn, could push thousands into homelessness. At the same time, new enforcement powers aim to speed up deportations and crack down on irregular arrivals, especially small boat crossings. The government insists the reforms are about restoring fairness. The Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Act strengthen state authority, creating a new Border Security Command and expanding surveillance and removal powers. Supporters say it's a necessary reset. Critics argue it punishes the vulnerable to calm public anger. Either way, the era of an open-ended asylum in Britain is over. What replaces it is a far harsher system built on control, deterrence, and the political need to show strength in the face of growing unrest. The reforms, aimed at calming the country, actually split it even further. For many ordinary citizens, the tougher rules felt overdue, a long-awaited admission that generosity had limits. But for charities, legal groups and aid workers, the changes crossed a line. More than 100 organizations warned that Britain was creating a permanent underclass, people allowed to live here but never truly belonging. Temporary status, endless reassessments, and benefit cutoffs exposed migrants to exploitation, homelessness, and fear, all while doing little to address the root causes driving people to flee in the first place. Politically, the stakes couldn't be higher. Labour's hard turn is partly about survival, responding to rising pressure from Reform UK and voters furious over migration. But enforcement alone may not deliver stability. Councils are still broke, housing is still scarce, and public services remain overstretched. Britain now faces a defining question. Can it rebuild trust and capacity while enforcing control, or will every new policy simply trigger the next wave of unrest? The answer won't come from laws alone. It will be shaped on the streets, online, and in communities already stretched to the breaking point.